Knowing how to use a pipeline. So often students get trapped in Maya doing UVs, and sometimes it's easier to do them in other places. So this is a disclaimer video. It's just for students to realize that there's other methods to do these things. And I think it's very important not to trap students into one application because that's all they can handle. What if you got a student that can handle many applications? Like on hand, I like 3D Studio Max, Maya, Blender, Zbrush, Photoshop. I have those in my arsenal. So what happens is if I need to do something very quickly, I can do that. But sometimes new students don't have that because they were only taught one thing. So this is a disclaimer video to show you that there are other things that you have to worry about down the road. Take this for example. This is a somewhat different object that I just kind of modeled out real quick, and I'm going to be taking it to different places. So for one example, I'll export the selection. By the way, you should know that under Plugin Manager there's OBJ export. This is a very good thing to keep checked on. OBJ export allows you to export to different applications. So I can export this, and let's say I take it to Blender. So Blender is an application. I'm using Blender 2.68, but I like 2.65, even though 2.69 is out. There's some issues with the newer one. I highly suggest new students to use 2.65 always, so until you get used to it. I can delete this object out, and then I can import this object in as a wavefront object. Okay, there it is. It came in, and right-click split area up here at the top. I can choose the UV texture image editor, and over here, this thing has no UVs, or not UVs that are worth anything anyway. To do the UVs back in Maya, I don't know, somewhat okay. But I'm just going to show you a different way to do this. If I hit N on the keyboard, I can go to display and turn on texture solid. This allows you to go into it and click on the object itself. Tab allows you to go into edit mode or object mode. So that's equivalent to Maya going into vertices, edges, and faces. Edit mode allows you to highlight edges and faces. Object mode, just objects. I can go in and open an image from my hard drive, and maybe I'll just choose a UV checker. If I hit L on the keyboard, it selects all these, and if I go to faces, it selects all the faces. I could choose UV checker. I can go over here and hit N on the keyboard to close that out. So this allows me to see that checker. So it works a little bit different here. What you do is you import your object and you dictate where the seams need to be ahead of time. Kind of like what Maya did. But what I like about this is it's super fast. So I'm holding Shift and Alt to highlight whole edge loops at a time. And then I can sit here and mark seam. Right there. Now I can see where that seam has been marked and then keep going on. So that's a nice thing about it, is like I can see where I've been and where I need to go. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to try it out, and maybe this one right here, mark seam. So L on the keyboard highlights it. U on the keyboard goes to unwrap, and I can just unwrap that object. There we go. The complex item that I had before is now unwrapped fully. Going into edit mode, I can just hit L and I can see all the UVs. Now, even if I didn't like the UVs, I could take these back to Maya by going into File, Export, go into Object, and go to Desktop and export it as OBJ. If you do that, though, make sure you have Selection Only on. So it allows you to get halfway. Let's say you're not really familiar with Blender and don't really want to learn a third-party application. That imported, by the way, it's right here, it's invisible. Right-click an existing material, go to Lambert. So there we go. What's nice about Blender is when you go into Blender under User Preferences, you have Blender or Maya. In this case, you can use the Maya preferences, and everything's the same. The hotkeys are all the same. Alt on the keyboard does the exact same thing as Maya. So there's no learning the navigation. It's already the same. So there's Blender. I also want to kind of show you Zbrush. Alright, so later on, maybe you'll get in touch with like Zbrush, and Zbrush is another application you have to kind of think about as far as your texturing is concerned even, because let's say it's included in your pipeline. We got this one, and again I exported it as an OBJ, that doesn't change. And then we go into Pixelogic Zbrush. Alright, so in here I can just import my weird object, close out Lightbox, click and drag, hit edit, just like that. And there's a plugin in here called UV Master. So it's built in, and you could just hit unwrap. Pretty much that's it. You can export this out, and then it's under weird object. Now, you're going to be using that a lot more. I just don't want you to get too far into ZBrush just yet because it is very complex. But let's import that in and see what it looks like. So other application construed that this is unwrapped, which is quite horrible. So for this shape, I would probably not use that application. But if you click here, it can give you a better layout. And you can see that there's probably one edge you can get rid of there. Cut it. And then now I have a little bit better layout. If I apply the material to it, you can see it is uniformed. It just needs some help. It got me there though. It got me somewhat close. So that's what I'm talking about as far as the pipeline is concerned. You know, if it's 2 clicks here versus 3 clicks there and you're on a deadline, I don't really care what I'm using at any one time. I'm going to use anything and everything at my disposal. And the same goes with, you know, the workforce. You know, if you're out there doing this stuff for a living, you don't care about what you're using. A mesh is a mesh. Until you get to the final stages of your pipeline, it might need to be in Maya. But there you go. It's all laid out, and I did have to use Maya for a little bit. If I have to get to the animation phase, obviously I would have to be in Maya because ZBrush doesn't do animation. Blender does animation, but it's kind of wonky, not too bad. It's a better modeling program. But learn to use third-party applications. Really, it does help. Huge for new students. Okay. There we go. That, in a nutshell, is the video I wanted to make, and let's go on.